G'day and welcome back to Pixorama, where today we're on the hunt after a wild Pika. Pika. Yes, that's right. In today's episode of Pixorama, I thought we'd go on the hunt after a quiet little squishy, round
North American rodent.
That is, of course, the Pika, which many of you may know from its cartoon translation, Pikachu. I didn't realize that Pikachu was actually based on a real animal until recently, and once I discovered this creature, I fell in love because they're possibly the cutest things that walk this earth. Anyway, with that said, let's dive on into Pixel Edit and see what we can rustle up, eh? Ooh, here we go again. And my goodness, it's hot here in Melbourne. It is 38 degrees here today.
And that, my good man, is 100 degrees Fahrenheit.
I wish you weren't my son-in-law. He would be somewhat annoying. In any case, the pavement outside my house is melting, and I am sitting inside in the comfort of my little recording studio with the fan off because it was causing too much noise, and that I couldn't tolerate. I want to bring you the best experience, which leads me to my next comment. I have to apologize in advance for the beginning of this video, because for the first time ever, I actually somehow lost the recordings of the start of this process. So I've had to recreate them, and you will notice that there is a slight discrepancy once we get a couple of minutes in, where things change to the new recordings. I pray for your forgiveness, dear viewer. With that said, let's get into it. You can see that I'm once again using Pixel Edit to draw this little doodle, and I have started a document at 80 by 80 pixels. That's about the resolution we're going to be working with here. Pixel Edit is a program that I still recommend, although the developer seems to have gone AWOL and has not updated the app in quite a few years. Nonetheless, it is available for Mac and PC, and you can download it from the link below if you're curious. But I assume at some point I will have to change over to another program, because as much as I love Pixel Edit, yeah, it seems like it's possibly dead in the water. Which is a real shame, because it is a fantastic and quite fully featured little program. In any case, we are starting our little piece here by outlining the creature that we are going to depict. I am not taking too much time, I'm not being too pedantic about this, I'm just doing a rough outline, and then, of course, as usual, I will clean it up. So you can see here that I've just done the squat, chubby little body, and I'm giving him some very vague details, and ooh, voila! Interesting, that's perhaps where the videos switch back to the ones I already recorded and did not lose. After this, I'm going to start the shadowing. And as usual, we are going to keep in mind where our light source is coming from. In this case, it is kind of from in front and above, coming down at an angle. So the reason I chose this light source in that position is because it tends to show off the shape of the Pika's body quite well. I wanted to show that his head is sticking out over his body a little bit, and thus you can see the shadow where his neck is, where the little fold is under his head. I'm having cute malfunction as I'm explaining this. I will go ahead and keep doing the shading and start adding some secondary colors here, and I will at some point decide that this palette is not quite serving me the way I would like, and I'm going to be a little flexible with it today. I'm not going to stick with this palette too rigidly. I'm going to allow myself to change things. Here is one example. I've just gone and created a new color here, and I am going to slot that into the palette up the top, and I think that fits much better than the one I was using before. And perhaps this is a good time to remind everyone that having reference images is a wonderful idea. You can see here that I have done a quick search after, after Pikas, and goodness me, look at this thing. It gathers flowers and stuff to make little nests out of, and it's just, look at that. How does this exist? I can't deal with this. For those of you who live in
North America
and have seen these creatures before, it may not be so novel to you, but for me, living in Australia, this is something I've never seen before, and it just serves to remind me that nature, in its vast complexity, is capable of furnishing many things, including ultimate cuteness. Anyway, returning to our little sketch here, I'm going to adjust the body somewhat to make it a little fatter. And then, once I'm sort of satisfied with how the Pika is looking, I'm going to give it a little environment to squat in cutely. I'm going to start by putting it atop a little rock here, because I think from the reference images I've seen, pikas enjoy sitting upon rocks. It seems to be something they are habitually seen to do and seem to quite enjoy it. So here's a rock. And I'm going with a blue rock rather than a warm colored rock, simply because I don't want it to clash with the pika. I want the pika to stand out. So don't fault me for accuracy here. We're just going for cuteness. I'm going to add a couple of little details in the background, a little palm tree or some sort of succulent, I guess. No, it's like a little mini palm tree, I suppose. I can't get away from this tropical thing. I just like tropical things.
Come with me to a tropical world of fantasy. I think you will love it just like I do.
That right there is proof that not every idea is a good one. Anyway, behind him I'm going to add some plants as well, just to deepen the scene a little bit. Again, I'm trying not to choose any colors that will clash with the pika himself, or herself, or itself. I just want to make sure that whatever is behind it looks nice, and that the pika is the center of attention here. So it should be the brightest object on the screen. It should be have the most contrast with whatever its surroundings are. And we'll see if that turns out to be the case. Adding some shadow work to the plants behind, and you can see that I've just done some simple light green highlights to kind of add some dimensionality to it. That word keeps coming up recently in my vernacular. I should probably do some sort of vocabulary training to improve my my corpus of words available. In any case, just getting towards the pika, instead of doing a big blob of flat shading, you can see that I've kind of broken it up in the deep shadows with just a couple of checkerboard pixels. I kind of like doing this because it allows you to break something up and give a bit of diffuse texture without adding another color to your design. So if you're really limited on your palette, doing shadows like this is a great way to save, just to economize on the colors you're using. You can see that I've done that quite a few times, just adding that little checkerboard pattern, just to make it clear that the color there is transitioning into a shadow. And now I'm going to add some grass around the front of the rock, just to add some interest there. I'm picking a rather hot green, so it stands out against the rock itself, because the other green tends to blend in a little bit. It may be a little too close to the color of the block itself. And now I'm just going to go and do some pixel massaging on the pika again, just to get closer to the form that I'm sort of looking for here. Adjusting the ears a little bit, lowering these little paws. And as you can see, this is actually quite easy to do. Actually, it reminds me of a little story, if you will allow the segue. Years ago, I went on a snowboarding trip with a good friend of mine, and he was actually really good at snowboarding, whereas it was my second time ever, the first time seeing me breaking both my wrists, but that's a story for another day. The point is that I was pretty garbage. And we got a few hours into the day, and I was still doing that awkward, slow, kind of falling leaf thing down the hill, and suddenly my friend whooshed up beside me and stopped and went, "Jimmy, what's going on?" And I said, "I don't know, I'm just having a bit of a hard time sort of getting this thing to behave." At which point he gave me this sort of absurd look and went, "Dude, just give the board hell, show it who's boss." And it was like this magical light bulb moment where I realized that the only thing really holding me back was me, being too hesitant and too cautious, and I was blocking myself up. And it was magical. From that moment on, I actually think I began learning how to snowboard. By the end of the day, I was making proper turns. I was, well, I wouldn't say killing it, but I made consistent progress from then on. So, Mike, if you're out there listening, thanks a bunch, buddy. That was pretty awesome advice. And it's absolutely advice which can be applied to any kind of creative endeavor. Don't be afraid ever to take, risks and be bold in your creative work. If you want to grab half the image and copy paste it somewhere else and flip it around, or change some colors, or change the entire palette, go ahead and do it. Why not? If you're making a huge change, maybe save beforehand, just in case. But, remember that you can always undo, and experimentation and taking risks is absolutely the way to making the best art that you are capable of. So yeah, don't be afraid. Go out there and just smash it. Whew. And now that we're tuning back in from that little segue into life advice from Jimzip, let's check in with where we're at here. I have done quite a lot of detail work. You can see that I've put some ridges on the tree there. I have done some extra grass. I've fixed up the shading a little bit and made things generally, I think, a bit more pleasant. And now I'm going to add a background to this image. I did, admittedly, have a bit of trouble with the background on this one, and you'll see that I redo it quite a few times. I wanted something that popped, but I also, of course, wanted something that did not clash with our hero figure in the middle there, wee little Pika. So, yeah, you can see that I'm going to go through a bunch of different color combinations. I will speed this up to save you the pain of the experimentation, because that is also a part of experimenting sometimes. But hey, no pain, no gain, bro. I'm sorry for that. Moving right along. I think that I have finally hit upon some color combination here that I actually like. I'm going with something a bit cooler. That nice green. It does also kind of add to the image. It makes it look like we're in kind of a little forest glade or something, perhaps. I will try and make it a little more contrasty by adding another shade of green up the top there. So far I haven't changed my color palette that much throughout this process. I've added 1 or 2 extra colors. I will add a couple more near the end once I get to finalizing this, which we are coming up to now. But really, I haven't strayed that far from the core palette. And look, depending on what you're working on, sometimes it just doesn't matter. If you want to add another 10 colors, who cares? If your artwork looks awesome in the end. If you really want to play the restriction game, it is always fun to work within limitation. I say this many times during my videos, and I'll say it again. Limitation is often a great way to force yourself to learn and to develop. But, you know, sometimes it's fine just to bend the rules a bit, and here you can see I've added another shade of light brown. I was actually very naughty and didn't add it to the palette at the top, and I've also added another shade of blue, which also has not been added to the palette. Don't do this. Try to add everything that you're using in your document up to the palette in the top, just so that you have a record of what you're actually using in your document. Because at this point I actually have, I hope it's only 2 shades that I've added, but now, see, I actually can't, I don't know anymore. So, bad me. That's a slap on the wrist. Oh, not that it's that bad. We are coming up to the finalization of this little guy, and so I'm just making some last second adjustments. You can see that I've added some white to his fur in various places, just to add some highlight and a bit of interest. And, you know, the main concern throughout all of this was that the Pika was popping against that background. And I think the colors in general behind him and around him are different enough that he does pop. You can see in the little previews down the bottom, I think Pika's popping. And now you can see that I've also changed my mind on the background that I've done. I don't like this subtle kind of faux gradation that I've done. I'm going to change it back to solid colors. I don't know which is better, I really don't. Perhaps you can tell me in the comments which one you prefer. But I ended up going with the flat color scheme in the end. So, all things considered, I think that will pretty much wrap it up for our little Pika pal. And here he is in all his jumpy glory. I think it came out pretty well. I will put the palette in the description if you want to play around with it. And that's it for this episode of Pixorama. I hope you enjoyed wandering into the wilderness with me and stumbling upon this small fluffy beast. If you enjoyed this video, smash the like button or leave a comment below. I do read them all, and who knows, one day your comment might find its way into the echelons of my hard drive as a piece of pixel art, which I will then share on YouTube. So, you know, it's a win-win. Once again, I am Jimzip. Until next time,